To everyone watching this video, thanks for stopping by and I'm glad you're here. This one's going to be a little bit different. I'm resuming my quest to learn more about and narrate classic creepypastas, and today I decided to tackle Sonic.exe. But I also wanted to revisit one of my earliest scary stories, and hopefully produce a higher quality recording. If this isn't your thing, I totally understand. But if you're up for a course of creepypasta followed by an original dessert, then keep watching. I'm a total Sonic the Hedgehog fan, much like everyone else. I like the newer games, but I don't mind playing the classics. I don't think I've ever played glitchy or hacked games before, though I don't think I want to play any after the experience I had. It started on a nice summer afternoon. I was playing Sonic Unleashed. I liked how you get to explore the towns in it, until I noticed, out of my peripheral vision, that the mailman had arrived and put something in my mailbox as usual, and then left. I paused my game to go see what I got in the mail. The only thing in the mailbox was a CD case for computers and a note. I took it inside. I looked at the note first and realized it was from my dear friend Kyle, let's just call him that, whom I hadn't heard from in 2 weeks. I know that because I recognized his handwriting, though what was weird is how it looked. It looked badly written and scratchy and somewhat difficult to read, as if Kyle was having a hard time writing it down and did it in a hurry. This is what he wrote. Tom, I can't take it anymore. I had to get rid of this thing somehow before it was too late, and I was hoping you'd do it for me. I can't do it. He's after me, and if you don't destroy the CD, he'll come after you too. He's too fast for me. Please, Tom, destroy this godforsaken disc before he comes after you too. It's too late for me. Destroy the disc and you'll destroy him, but do it quick, otherwise he'll catch you. Don't even play the game. It's what he wants. Just destroy it. Please, Kyle. Well, that was certainly weird. Even though Kyle is my best friend and I haven't seen him in 2 weeks, I didn't do what he asked me. I didn't think that a simple gaming disc would do anything bad to him. After all, it's just a game, right? Boy, was I wrong about that. Anyway, I looked at the disc and it looks like any ordinary computer CD disc, except it had black marker on it written Sonic.exe, and it was much unlike Kyle's handwriting, meaning that he must have gotten it from someone else, like a pawn shop or eBay. When I saw Sonic on the writing of the CD, I was actually excited and wanted to play it, since I'm a big Sonic fan. I went up to my room and turned on my computer, put the disc in and installed the game. When the title screen popped up, I noticed that it was the first Sonic game. I was like, awesome, because like I said earlier, I like the classics. The first thing I noticed that was out of place was when I pressed start. There was a split second when I saw the title image turned into something much different. Something that I now consider horrifying, before cutting to black. I remember what the image looked like in that split second before the game cut to black. The sky had darkened, the title emblem was rusted and ruined, the Sega 1991 was now instead Sega 666, and the water had turned red, like blood, except it looked hyper-realistic. But the freakiest thing that was in that split-second frame was Sonic. His eyes were pitch black and bleeding, with 2 glowing red dots staring right at me, and his smile had stretched wider up to the edge of his face. I was rather disturbed about that image when I saw it, though I figured that it was just a glitch and forgot about it. After it cut to black, it stayed like that for about 10 seconds or so, and then another weird thing happened. The save file select from Sonic the Hedgehog 3 popped up, and I was like, WTF? What's this doing in the first Sonic game? Anyway, then I noticed something off. The background was the dark cloudy sky of the bad Stardust Speedway level from Sonic CD, and there were only 3 saved files. The music was that creepy Caverns of Winter music from Earthbound, only it was extended and seemed to have been in reverse. And the image for the save file where you see a preview of the level you're on is just red static for all 3 files. What freaked me out more was the character select. It showed only Tails, Knuckles, and to my surprise, Dr. Robotnik. Now I was sure that something was up. I mean, how can you play as Robotnik in a classic Sonic game, for crying out loud? That's when I realized that this wasn't a glitchy game, it was a hacked game. Yeah, it definitely looked hacked. It was really creepy, but as a smart gamer, I wasn't scared, or at least, I tried not to be. I told myself that it was just a hacked game and there's nothing wrong with that. Anyways, shaking off the creeped out feeling, I picked file 1 and chose Tails, and when I selected that, I got started. The game froze for about 5 seconds and I heard a creepy pixelated laugh that sounded an awful lot like that Kefka guy from Final Fantasy, before cutting to black. The screen stayed black for about 10 seconds or more. Then it showed the typical level title thing, except the simplistic shapes were different shades of red and the text showed only Hill Act 1. The screen faded in and the level title vanished, revealing Tails in the Green Hill Zone from Sonic 1. The music was different though. It sounded like a peaceful melody in reverse. I started playing and had Tails start running like you would in any of the classic Sonic games. But what was odd was that, as Tails was running along the level, there was nothing but flat ground and a few trees for 5 minutes. That was when the peaceful music started to lower down into slow, deep tones, very slowly as I kept going. I suddenly saw something and I stopped to see what it was. It was one of the small animals lying dead on the ground bleeding. That was when the music started to slow down. Tails had a shocked and saddened look on his face that I never saw him have before, so I had him move along, and he kept that worried look on his face. As he kept moving, I saw more dead animals, and as Tails moved past them, he looked more and more worried. The music continued to lower, and he moved past more dead animals, and I was shocked to see how they all died. They looked like somebody killed them in rather gruesome ways. The squirrel was hanging on a tree with what appeared to be his entrails hanging out, a bunny had all 4 of his limbs torn off, and a duck had his eyes gouged out and his throat slit. I felt sick to my stomach when I saw this massacre, and apparently so did Tails. After a few more seconds, there were no more animals and the music seemed to have stopped, and I pushed Tails onward. After a minute passed after the music stopped, Tails was running up a hill, and then he stopped. It wasn't until I saw why. Sonic was there on the other side of the screen with his back against Tails with his eyes closed. Tails looked happy to see Sonic, but then his smile faded, obviously noticing that Sonic wasn't responding to him. He was acting as if he was totally oblivious of Tails' presence. Tails walked slowly toward Sonic, and I wasn't even moving my keyboard to make him move, so this had to have been a cutscene. Suddenly I began to have a growing feeling of dread as Tails walked closer to Sonic to get his attention. For some strange reason, I thought that Tails was in danger and something bad was going to happen. I heard faint static growing louder as Tails was but inches away from Sonic, and stopped and stuck his hand out to touch him. That foreboding feeling in my gut was growing stronger, and I felt the urge to tell Tails to get away from Sonic as the static grew louder. Suddenly, in a split second, I saw Sonic's eyes open, and they were black with those red glowing dots, just like that title image, though there wasn't a smile. When that happened, the screen turned black and the static sound was off. It stayed black for about 7 seconds, and then white text appeared forming a message, saying, "Hello, do you want to play with me?" At this point I was creeped out, and I didn't want to continue with the game, but my curiosity got the better of me when I was taken to a different level with the level title now saying, "Hide and Seek." This time I was in the Angel Island level from Sonic 3, and it looked like everything was on fire. Tails looked as though he was scared out of his wits this time. He actually looked at me and made frantic gestures to me as if he wanted to get out of the area he was in as soon as possible. I was starting to get freaked out by all of this. I mean, Tails was actually breaking the 4th wall, trying to tell me to get him out of there. So I pressed down on the arrow key as hard as I could and made him run as fast as he could. A pixelated version of that creepy theme when you meet Shadow at the Ark as Robotnik from SA2 was playing as I made Tails trek through the desolate forest. I was trying to help him escape from whatever he was trying to run from. Suddenly I heard that creepy laugh again, that awful Kefka laugh, right after 10 seconds had passed as I helped Tails run through the forest. Then I started seeing flashes of Sonic popping everywhere on the screen, again with those black and red eyes. The music changed to that suspenseful drowning jingle as I saw Sonic behind Tails slowly gaining up on him, flying. Sonic wasn't running, he was actually flying. The flying pose his sprite was making looked very similar to Metal Sonic's flying pose in Sonic CD, except it was just Sonic and he had the black and red eyes again. This time he had the most deranged looking grin on his face. He looked as though he was enjoying the torment he was giving the poor little fox as he gained up on him. Suddenly when Tails tripped, another cutscene, the music stopped and Sonic vanished. Tails laid there and started crying for 15 seconds. The scene was rather upsetting to watch and I kind of teared up myself. But then Sonic appeared right in front of Tails, and Tails looked up in horror. Blood started to come down those blackened eyes of Sonic's as a grin slowly grew from his face as he looked down at the horrified fox, and I could do nothing but watch. In a split second, Sonic lunged at Tails right before the screen went black, and there was a loud screeching noise that only lasted 5 seconds. The text returned, only this time it said, "You're too slow. Want to try again?" And then that god-awful laugh came with it. I was so shocked by what had happened. Did Sonic murder Tails? No, he couldn't have. He and Tails are supposed to be best friends, right? Why did Sonic do that to him? I shook the shock off as I was brought back to the character select. The save file that had Tails was different though. Tails was no longer in the box itself, but in the TV screen itself, which was flickering with that red static. Tails' expression scared me. His eyes were black and bleeding, his orange fur had gone black, and he had an expression of anguish on his face. Trying to ignore all that, I picked Knuckles next. The laugh came again and the screen cut to black again and stayed there for another 10 seconds. This time the level said, "You can't run." I was really freaked out by now. I couldn't really tell if this was a glitch or a hack or some kind of sick twisted joke. Or anything really. But despite my fear of what happened next, I kept playing. The next level looked much different. It had the ground of the Scrap Brain Zone, but the sky background looked like the main menu. It had the dark reddish cloud sky. But it was the music that creeped me out the most. It sounded like Giga's theme right after you beat Pokey in Earthbound. I also noticed that Knuckles looked afraid just like Tails did, though not as much. Or rather, he looked a little unnerved. He broke the fourth wall just like Tails, and looked as if he wasn't sure about going on, but I made him move anyway. He ran down the straight pathway in this dark level, and as he did, the screen started to flicker red static a couple times, and then that maddening laugh came again. Then after a few seconds of running, I noticed several bloodstains on the metallic ground, and I felt a growing sense of fear again, thinking something horrible is going to happen to Knuckles. He looked nauseated walking down this blood-stained road, but I still kept him going. Suddenly, as Knuckles kept running, Sonic appeared right in front of him with those black and red eyes, and then red static appeared again, and then the static vanished slowly, leaving nothing but black screen with text saying, "Found you." I was now scared. Sonic found Knuckles already? What was going on? Anyway, the red static came again, and then I was back to the level. Knuckles looked like he was panicking, and Sonic was nowhere to be found. And this time, that high-pitched squealing from the Silent Hill 1's final boss was playing. Was this some kind of boss battle with Sonic? I hope to God it wasn't, honestly. Suddenly, Sonic appeared right behind Knuckles, in what appeared to be pixelated black smoke. I made Knuckles turn and then punch Sonic, but Sonic vanished in black pixelated smoke before I could even land a hit, and then that terrible laugh went off again. Then Sonic appeared behind Knuckles again, and then when I made him punch, Sonic vanished laughing. Knuckles was panicking even more, and even I felt like I was going crazy. Sonic was practically playing with us. He was playing a sick, twisted little mind game with me and Knuckles. Another cutscene played as Knuckles fell to his knees and clutched his head, sobbing. I felt his agony. Sonic was actually driving us both crazy. And then in a split second, Sonic lunged at Knuckles and the screen went black, and there was another distorted screeching noise that lasted for at least 3 seconds. Another text message appeared. So many souls to play with, so little time. Would you agree? What the hell? Just what was going on? I started to think Sonic was actually trying to talk to me through the game, but I was too scared to think that. I was brought back to the main menu, and this time the second file box had Knuckles in the TV screen. His red fur had darkened to a reddish gray, his dreadlocks were dripping with blood, and his eyes were black and bleeding too. And he had a look of sadness on his face. I began to think that those are the actual characters trapped in those TV screens on the save files, but I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. So I shut off the game and took a break. I took a nap, wish I hadn't though, because I then began to have the most disturbing nightmare. I was in pitch black darkness, though I was under the light given off by a lamp that hung high above my head. I could hear the cries of Knuckles and Tails nearby. They were saying stuff like, "Help us," and "Why did you give us to him?" and "Run away before he gets you too." Their cries died out as I then heard Sonic laugh. His laugh. It sounded a lot like the distorted Kefka laugh. "You're a lot of fun to play with, kid, just like your friend Kyle, though he didn't last long." I was scared and looked around for the source of the voice. "Won't be long now until you join him and all my other friends." I saw him walking towards me, flickering in and out in several directions. "You can't run, kid. You're in my world now, just like the others." When he grabbed me, I saw his bleeding black and red eyes, grinning face, and I woke up with a fright. After a couple of hours, I decided to continue playing the game. I don't know why, but I had to know. I had to figure out why this was happening. So I turned on the computer, turned on the game, and selected Robotnik next. I still thought that this was wacky, playing as Robotnik, but anyway, the level title appeared again, and this time it said ... which I found really freaky. I was in some kind of hallway, though it didn't really look like it was from any of the classic Sonic games. It did have the pixelated style though. The floor was shiny and checkered, the walls were a dark grayish purple with animated candlelight, and a few dark bloodstains here and there. There was a dark red curtain hanging above on the top part of the screen. Every 12 seconds or so, that red curtain swayed very slowly, but whenever you're playing the game you can barely see it move. The music was oddly pleasant, a piano playing a rather sad yet peaceful song. But I knew better. This was the song that played in Hill Act 1, only it wasn't in reverse. Robotnik didn't look entirely nervous like Tails and Knuckles did, but he did have a suspicious look on his face as if he was just a bit paranoid. He did a little animation when I just left him standing. He turned his head to the left and then to the right at least twice, and then shrugged at me, as if he had no idea where he was or what was going on. Even though I was scared out of my mind about what was going to happen, I had Robotnik continue onward. He did his usual running animation, you know, when you've beaten him at the end of the classic Sonic game and you chase him. And we continued going through the hallway. Then I stopped at a long flight of stairs leading downward. Now I was nervous, and even Robotnik seemed unsure of himself, though I pressed onward. As I led Robotnik down the stairs, I noticed that the walls had gotten darker and more reddish. The red torches were now an eerie blue. Then we landed on another hallway. This one was longer than the last one, or at least it felt like it, and then we headed down another flight of stairs. This one was much longer, taking at least 1 full minute. And then I heard that horrid Kefka laugh again, and the music slowly faded until it was quiet. As it did, the walls turned more black-red, and the torches were a black flame now. When Robotnik landed on the third hallway, I noticed he now looked really creeped out, though he tried to hide it. Honestly, I couldn't blame him, as I was scared too. Suddenly Sonic popped right in front of Robotnik the same way he did Knuckles, and then red static. The red static lasted for about 15 seconds, and then it showed me a most unpleasant image. The image showed a hyper-realistic Sonic standing in the darkness where you can only see his face, while his head and torso faded into black. And when I say hyper-realistic, I mean like he looked so real you could actually see the lines in his blue fur, as if you could actually feel the fur if you touched the screen. His face, oh god, he had the most horrifying smile I had ever seen. And that's saying something, considering I saw that image at the start of the game. His eyes were wide and black, and once again crying blood, which also looked hyper-realistic this time, and there were 2 small glowing red dots in those black eyes staring right at me, as if staring into my mind. His grin was wide and demonic. It literally stretched to the sides of his face like a Cheshire cat, except Sonic had fangs, very sharp fangs. Much like the werehog's teeth, except more vicious looking. They were somewhat yellowish, and from the look of it, he had stains of blood, small bits of flesh on his lips. And there was blood on the fangs too, as if he ate some animal. I stared at that gruesome image for a good 30 seconds, never taking my eyes off it. I felt as if he was actually looking at me, smiling at me. That face, it just took 10 seconds for it to etch itself into my brain for good. Then the screen flickered with red static again 3 times, and on the 3rd time I heard the Kefka laugh. Except this time it sounded distorted, demonic even. It went back to the image again, except this time there was red text again. Though it was messed up, it was pretty much one of the most horrifying things I looked at since I had this game. I am God. It was when I read that message while looking at Sonic when it hit me. I realized right then and there. This Sonic was a monster. A pure, evil, sadistic, all-powerful, nightmarish, demented monster. And all of his victims, including Tails, Knuckles, Robotnik, and possibly Kyle, are just his little toys, and the game is the very gateway into his chaotic, nightmarish world. The very hell his victims are trapped in. Suddenly, in an actual split second, I screamed as Sonic lunged at the screen, screeching loudly with his mouth wide open. It was an unnatural length, revealing nothing but a literally spiraling abyss of pure darkness before the red static came again. This time it was much louder and distorted, so loud that it hurt my ears. I yelled and grabbed my ears as the red static screeched for a good 7 seconds. Then it stopped. It showed nothing but black screen. As I sat there staring at the black screen, one last text came up. "Ready for round 2, Tom?" The Kefka laugh now sounded more clear, as if Sonic was right behind me. Played again 3 times as I looked at that text in shock and confusion. Then I got booted back to the main menu, and this time the third save file had a TV image of Robotnik in the same tormented state as Tails and Knuckles. Robotnik's skin turned a dull gray, his mustache drooped and had blackened, and his glasses broke and blood was coming from them, and he had a mere dead-like expression on his face. I looked at Tails, Knuckles, and Robotnik, and I cried a bit. I pitied them for the agony they'd gone through, and the fact that they were forever trapped within the game, forever tormented by that horrid hedgehog, and always would be. Then the computer shut itself off. I couldn't turn it back on no matter what I did. I sat there for maybe 25 seconds, horrified by what had just happened. Sonic is the very embodiment of evil. He tortures people who play his game in more ways than one, and when he gets bored, he drags you into the game, literally drags you to hell, where he can play with you always as his toy. I can't get the CD out of my computer. I think it's stuck in there, but at least I managed to turn it back on now. After I sat there for 25 seconds, I heard a voice right behind me, like a whisper. "Try to keep this interesting for me, Tom." I turned around to see where the voice came from, and what I saw made me scream. Sitting on my bed, staring right at me, was a Sonic plushie, smiling with bloodstains under its eyes. I used to work as a mall security guard for a dead mall that closed down during the midst of the COVID pandemic. It wasn't a bad job by any means. I rather enjoyed walking around the largely deserted interior and just letting my mind wander. I think there were only 2 or 3 stores left right before it closed down: Bed Bath & Beyond, a vitamin store, and a hair and nail place. Occasionally I'd walk by and talk to the store owners, as there really wasn't anything else to do there except walk around and play games on my phone. Everyone knew the mall was on its last leg, so when we finally were notified of the impending closure, no one was surprised. Cut forward to 2 weeks before closing. All 3 of the stores were packing up their inventory into boxes, and I couldn't remember the last time we had anyone visit the mall. My job was largely the same. It was a bit more tedious as time went on, but I still enjoyed it. I should tell you that the mall didn't have security cameras. Or at least, working security cameras. Apparently they broke down before I got there, and the mall was just too broke to replace them. Up until that point, it really made no difference, as nothing even remotely interesting happened there. However, one day something interesting did happen, and I wished that the system worked. I think it was about 10 a.m. when I was making my rounds through the mall. It was actually fairly large, with 2 stories and what used to be 5 different anchors. Most of the closed stores had flimsy wooden wall things placed in front of them, but many others just had glass and the security gates, so you could see everything inside. There were a few that were really messy inside, but honestly it didn't make any difference since no one besides me would see it. I usually started off walking around the upper level and then would make my way down one of the non-functioning escalators to the lower level. I was almost halfway through my sweep of the lower level when something caught the corner of my eye. On one of the second floor balconies, which extended on either side above the first level, there was a still black figure on nearly the other side of the mall. I froze for half a second, as it caught me completely off guard. I knew for a fact that it hadn't been there 10 minutes earlier when I walked through that stretch of the upper level. I squinted and thought it looked like a person, but it didn't appear to be moving. If it was a person, they were dressed in all black. After a few seconds of trying to think, it dawned on me that one of the store owners might be messing with me, and that the object was a mannequin. In my mind, that was the most plausible scenario, but of course I still had to check it out. There was an escalator leading to the upper level about 100 feet from where I was standing. The mall was laid out in a kind of plus-sign floor plan, with one anchor at each of the ends and the other anchor off on one corner in the middle. I had been trying to maintain eye contact with a person, if they were a person, after I noticed them, but they'd be out of my field of vision for about 5 seconds as I'd make my way up the escalator. I tried to keep my eyes locked on them as I walked the stairs with a steady pace. They disappeared when I reached the second step, and I decided to wait for a second or two and then peeked my head back down. I did so, and they were still there. This time I walked quietly and quickly up the escalator, and came out at a place about 50 feet from the corner leading to that wing of the building. I walked over, but froze in my tracks, when I noticed that the person was no longer there. Now you might be wondering how that could be scary. It was probably a person after all, but in that moment it was scary to me. Mostly due to the fact that I didn't see, or more importantly, hear anything while they were out of eyesight. I knew for a fact that that particular end of the mall didn't have any open stores that someone could use to escape without at least having a key to the gate. And even then, they would have had to lift it up, and then back down. Up until this point I had been more cautious, but now I was starting to get nervous. After a second or two I started walking forward again, and after about 15 seconds I had made my way down to where the person had been standing. I stood still and looked around, and saw absolutely nothing. I mean, not even any motion or light, and I didn't hear anything either. The 3 stores still in the mall were around another corner in another wing of the building. I honestly didn't even know what to do next or where to go. I looked down over the edge of the balcony, which was near a planter about 10 feet away. I was thinking how they might have parkoured over to it when I wasn't looking, but again, whoever that was didn't make a sound. After a few more moments of deliberation, I decided to make my way to the other wing of the building, across where I came out of the escalator, where the other businesses were located. They were all on the first floor though. I walked around, checking the gates and the cardboard walls, but everything seemed undisturbed. I decided to continue on and walk around the entire upper floor again, even though I had just been doing that about 20 minutes prior. Everything was exactly the same. Occasionally I'd pause and listen, but every time I would, I'd hear absolutely nothing. Even the people in the shops didn't make much noise, as they were usually on their cell phones too. Having completed another lap on the top floor, I next planned to go down on one of the escalators and walk along the bottom. Up until that point, I hadn't expected the person to have jumped down onto the planter, so I was expecting them to still be somewhere upstairs. But honestly, now I wasn't sure what I was expecting. But however freaky things had been so far, nothing could prepare me for what happened next. Halfway down the escalator, I heard a soft thump somewhere above me. While it's true that birds would sometimes fly into some of the windows, that usually wasn't the cause with the skylights in the top of the building. I looked up and saw him. At least, I imagined it was a him. His face was pressed up against one of the windows that looked down at an angle, and I could see he was wearing a black beanie, face mask, and jacket. My heart dropped into my stomach as we made eye contact for about 2 seconds. Slowly he moved away from the window as I contemplated my next move. There was a security passageway that led to the roof on the second floor, and there were 2 other ways to get there from the first floor. I decided to go to one of the passages on the first floor, as I now assumed that he had jumped down initially, and that by going to the first floor I might see which route he took to the roof. At this point I was running, and it took me 15 seconds to get to the passageway. It was locked, as I was expecting, and after unlocking it, running through 2 hallways and up a narrow flight of stairs, I reached the little area with the door leading to the roof. I was considering whether to try to be stealthy or not, but I decided to just screw it, and I unlocked and threw open the door. It took my eyes a few seconds to adjust to the light, and after looking around and obviously not seeing him, I made my way to the window where he was looking down. I didn't find anyone there either, including where he appeared to be placing his face against the glass. I looked around again, still saw nothing. I considered it unlikely that he had unlocked either the upper level passageway or the other lower level passageway, and I assumed that he scaled one of the walls. Unlike the situation inside, this was a bit more plausible, as there were several locations where either a big dumpster or a particularly tall platform could be used for climbing up. There were also a few fire escapes, which weren't supposed to be able to be used from the ground level, but which I didn't think would have been an issue for him. I decided to walk along the periphery of the roof, at least as close as I could get to it, and take one last look for anyone. There was a fairly large parking lot surrounding the building, but other than the 4 cars, mine and the 3 shop owners, there was nothing. No cars, no bicycles, no people, no nothing. I began to feel a sense of relief that I wouldn't have to confront whoever this person was, and I started to make my way back to the door entrance I used before, but then my heart sank again. From the very edge of the parking lot, I heard a blood-curdling scream that lasted all of 5 seconds. I dashed over and looked, and for a moment I thought I could make out the person dressed in all black at the very edge where the parking lot meets a tree line leading to a drainage ditch. However, either that wasn't the person or that person left, because after a second or two I didn't see them anymore. I eventually made my way back to the inside of the mall after having locked both the entrance on the roof and the entrance on the ground level inside. My heart was still pounding, and I half expected him to pop out at me right after I reached the inside entrance. Luckily he didn't. I quickly asked the store owners if they saw or heard anything, and each one of them shook their heads. Apparently they hadn't even heard the scream I heard earlier, and they were unaware of what had just been going on. I explained the situation and they each seemed concerned. For the rest of the day I stayed more nearby to their area, while occasionally making my rounds in the store. Every time I did so, I'd feel my heart rate start rising, and I'd feel a sense of relief when I got back to where the stores were. Evening came, and eventually all the stores closed down. I locked all the entrances, and we all met each other and then walked out as a group. I took one last look behind me, I locked the doors behind me, and we saw each other to our cars, which thankfully were all parked in the same area. There actually wasn't a nighttime security guard, probably because the mall was totally broke, so I just went home after that. I filled out an incident report and spoke to the mall managers, who didn't really seem to care. They said they talked to the police about there being a suspicious person in the area, however I have no idea if they actually did. Now maybe you think there's more to this story, but there actually isn't. The mall closed down several weeks later, and I never saw that person again. I even worked as a security guard there for another 2 months, but nothing else even remotely exciting happened. I've since moved on to another job, gone back to school part-time, and am in the midst of looking for another, better job. I still think about just what that person was trying to accomplish by doing what they did that day. I have no idea if it was supposed to be some kind of prank, or if it was just some stupid teenager trying to impress his friends. But whatever it was, I'll never know.